The wind bit sharp that February morning across the Montana plains. The land stretched wide and lonely, dusted in frozen snow. Samuel Crawford stood on his porch, boots planted firm, coat collar turned up against the cold. In his hand, an old pocket watch ticked steady. 6:47. The stagecoach was late. The Crawford ranch rose behind him. 2 stories of solid timber and silence. A house with good bones and empty rooms. For 3 long years, Samuel had lived in that silence. 3 years since Sarah died giving birth. 3 years of cooking for one, talking to horses, and forgetting what another person's voice sounded like across the breakfast table. The idea of a mail-order marriage had started as something practical. He wasn't a man for courting. He wanted company, not heartbreak. A woman needed safety. He needed someone to share the quiet. It wasn't supposed to be complicated. But as the stagecoach wheels appeared in the distance, dust rising on the frozen ground, something twisted in his chest. He straightened his coat, touched the ring in his vest pocket. Sarah's ring, the one he couldn't bring himself to bury. The coach rattled to a stop, snow spraying over Samuel's boots. The driver leaned down, grinning with that cruel amusement men sometimes had when they thought they knew more than you. "Your package, Crawford." A woman stepped down carefully, black traveling dress brushing the snow, face hidden beneath a thick veil. She carried a small trunk and moved like someone who'd learned not to stumble when the world watched. Samuel stepped forward, rehearsed words of welcome dying in his throat. "Mr. Crawford," she said, her voice calm, almost steady. "I'm Clara Bennett." Her gloved hand rose. She lifted the veil. Samuel froze. The right side of her face was marked by deep, burned scars. Skin puckered and pale, running from temple to jaw, twisting her mouth into a half-smile that wasn't really a smile at all. The left side was untouched, delicate and beautiful, framed by dark hair. The contrast was jarring, almost cruel. For a heartbeat, the world went silent, except for the wind. Clara read the shock on his face instantly. People always did. Her chin lifted, shoulders squaring like a soldier on parade. "The agency didn't tell you," she said flatly. "I understand if the contract's void. I can take the next stage east." Samuel opened his mouth, but no words came. All the polite phrases he'd practiced vanished. He'd expected someone plain, maybe timid, not a woman carved by fire and still standing tall. He heard Sarah's voice in his memory, soft but firm. "Do the right thing, Samuel. Be better than your fear. The agreement stands." He managed, finally. His voice came out rough but certain. "Welcome to Crawford Ranch, Miss Bennett." A flicker of surprise crossed Clara's eyes. Then she nodded once, calm again. The driver spat tobacco into the snow. "Good luck, Crawford. You'll need it." Samuel ignored him, reached for her trunk. Clara didn't thank him. She walked past him up the porch steps, her back straight, her movements careful but proud. He watched her disappear into his house, and for the first time in years, Samuel realized he'd just made a choice that might change everything. Inside, Clara stood in the middle of the kitchen, surveying the room. Torn curtains, dust on every surface, cold hearth, and a table that hadn't seen a home-cooked meal in months. She set her bag down and took off her gloves with quiet purpose. "You don't have to," Samuel began, awkward. "Where do you keep the cleaning rags?" she asked, not looking at him. "Under the basin," he said, but she'd already found them. Her movements were efficient, like a woman used to hard work and no help. She began wiping the table, sweeping dust into her palm, her sleeves rolled to the elbows. Samuel stood there, uncertain, hat in his hands. "I'll show you the bedrooms," he said finally. "You should take the—" "I'll take the maid's room," she interrupted gently, nodding toward the small one off the kitchen. "That one." "That's not right," Samuel said. "You should have the main room upstairs." Clara looked up. The lamplight caught the scars on her face, making shadows dance across her skin. "Mr. Crawford, let's be clear about terms. I'm here to work. Keep house, cook, mend. Nothing more is expected or offered. The small room is sufficient." Her words were polite but final. Samuel wanted to argue, but he couldn't find a reason that didn't sound foolish. He stepped back, tipped his hat, and left her to her work. Dinner that night was salt pork and beans. Clara cooked with quiet skill, each motion careful, practiced. Samuel sat across from her, uncomfortable in his own home. "How long have you been alone here?" she asked after a long silence. 3 years. Wife died. Childbirth. I'm sorry. It was God's will, he said automatically, though he no longer believed it. Clara nodded once, eyes steady. I know what it is to lose. They ate in silence after that. The unsigned marriage license sat on the mantel like an accusation. Both saw it. Neither mentioned it. When the dishes were done, Samuel went to the barn to check the horses that didn't need checking. When he returned, Clara's door was closed, a faint light glowing under it. He paused, listening. The sound of movement, soft, steady, reminded him there was another heartbeat in his house. He went to bed, but didn't sleep. In her small room, Clara stood by the window, looking out toward the dark barn. Her hand brushed the scars on her cheek, a reflex she hated. "1 week," she whispered to the glass, "if he sends me back, I'll go west." The wind howled outside. The fire popped. She closed her eyes and tried not to remember the screams, the smoke, the fire that had taken everything from her years ago. Morning would come. It always did. And somewhere between the ashes of their pasts, 2 strangers had begun, something they didn't yet understand. The sun rose cold and pale over Crawford Ranch, turning the snow to silver. Samuel woke early, the way ranchers do. Habit, not choice. The house felt different now, alive somehow. He heard the faint clatter of pans in the kitchen. The smell of coffee drifted through the hallway. For a moment, it felt like the old days, when Sarah hummed as she cooked. But when he walked into the kitchen, it was Clara standing there, hair pinned neatly, sleeves rolled, moving with quiet purpose. "Morning," Samuel said. "Breakfast will be ready soon," she replied, not looking up. Her tone was calm, distant, like she was speaking to a customer, not a husband. He sat at the table, unsure whether to speak. The sound of the fire crackling filled the silence between them. "You didn't have to start work so early," he said finally. Clara set a plate in front of him. Eggs, biscuits, bacon crisped just right. "I like early mornings," she said. "Less noise." Samuel nodded, feeling clumsy. "You can make noise here. Nobody to mind it." She glanced at him briefly. Maybe one day. After breakfast, Samuel went out to the barn. The horses nickered softly when he entered. He worked through the morning, trying not to think about the woman inside his house. But every quiet moment brought her face back. Not just the scars, but her eyes, the strength in them, the way she held herself like she'd been knocked down by life and refused to stay there. By the time he came back, the house was spotless. Curtains washed and hung to dry, floor swept, table polished. Clara moved like a shadow, present but never demanding space. "You've done a lot," Samuel said. "I like order," she replied simply. "It helps." That evening, they ate together again, still quiet, but the air between them had softened. 2 weeks passed that way. Quiet routines, shared work, little conversation. The snow melted into mud, and March winds swept through the valley. Samuel noticed things. How Clara touched every object carefully, as if everything could break. How she hid her right cheek when strangers were near. How she hummed softly while kneading bread, unaware she was doing it. On a Saturday morning, Samuel hitched the wagon. "We'll go to town," he said. "Need supplies." Clara hesitated. "I'll wear my veil." He almost told her she didn't have to, but something in her eyes stopped him. "All right," he said instead. The road to Bitterroot was rough, frozen ruts shaking the wagon. They didn't speak. When the town came into view, a cluster of wooden buildings, the steeple of the small church rising over them, Clara's shoulders tensed. She straightened her spine like someone walking into enemy ground. As they entered the general store, conversations quieted. Heads turned. A few people smiled politely. Others didn't bother to hide their curiosity. Mrs. Hartwell, the preacher's wife, was the first to approach. "Mr. Crawford," she said loudly, too brightly. "And this must be your arrangement." Samuel's jaw tightened. "This is Mrs. Clara Bennett," he said firmly. "Of course," Mrs. Hartwell said, eyes flicking to Clara's veil. "Well, bless you both." "Such a charitable act, Mr. Crawford," taking in the unfortunate. Clara's hand clenched around her basket. "We need flour," she said quietly. Mrs. Hartwell smiled wide. "Of course, God bless you." As they moved through the aisles, Clara kept her head down. The whispers followed, soft, cutting things that sliced deep anyway. Samuel felt heat rise in his chest. When they stepped outside, Marcus Dalton was leaning against a post, grinning. He owned the Triple D Ranch, the biggest spread in the county, and he carried his arrogance like a badge. "Well, I'll be," he drawled. Crawford finally bought himself a wife. Didn't know they offered discounts for damaged goods. Samuel froze. Dalton's smirk widened. Clara lifted her head slowly. "Mr. Dalton," she said evenly, "I've heard worse from better men." Dalton laughed. Sharp tongue for a charity case. Before Samuel could speak, Clara picked up a sack of flour herself and carried it to the wagon. Her back was straight, her step steady. Samuel loaded the rest in silence. Dalton's laughter echoed after them. On the road home, the silence between them felt heavy. Samuel's hands gripped the reins so tight his knuckles turned white. Clara stared at the horizon. "You don't owe me defense, Mr. Crawford," she said finally. "Maybe I owe myself one," he answered, his voice low. She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes softened, just a little. That night, Samuel sat at the kitchen table long after Clara went to bed. The marriage license still sat on the mantel, unsigned, waiting. He stared at it, thinking about Dalton's words, Mrs. Hartwell's false pity, the way Clara had faced them both without flinching. He thought about Sarah, about what she'd tell him if she could. "Be better than your fear." He stood, took the pen, and signed his name. The next morning, Clara found the license waiting on the table, his signature already dry. She looked at him, eyes uncertain. "Why now?" Samuel's voice was quiet. "Because I keep my promises." Her hand trembled as she signed beside his name, Clara Bennett Crawford. The contract was sealed. But what neither of them knew was that a paper promise was just the beginning. Weeks passed, and slowly something began to grow between them. Not love. Not yet, but something gentler. Respect, perhaps. Understanding. The house began to change under Clara's care. Curtains mended, floors polished, the smell of baking bread filling the air. One morning, Samuel came in from the barn and found his old winter coat laid neatly on the table. Mended, every tear stitched clean and strong. "My mother used to stitch like this," he said, running his hand over the seam. Clara smiled faintly. "Mine, too." It was a small thing, but it mattered. Then, in late March, the blizzard came. Snow fell thick and fast, trapping them inside for 3 days. At first they stayed polite, speaking only of chores and firewood. By the second day, the ice began to thaw between them. Samuel taught her to play checkers. She was terrible. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in years. "You're letting me win," she said. "I'm trying," he said. "You're just that bad." She threw a checker at him. He caught it, grinning. By the third day, she was reading aloud from Sarah's old books, poems about hope and loss. Her voice was soft, uncertain at first, then steady. Samuel sat across from her, half listening, half watching. That night, she fell asleep in the chair by the fire, the book open in her lap. Samuel stood over her, heart pounding. The scars softened in the firelight. He shouldn't touch her. But he lifted her gently, carried her to her room, laid her down on the narrow bed. She murmured his name in her sleep. He stood in the doorway, hands trembling. He didn't understand what was happening, only that it terrified him. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, something else began to melt. Spring came late that year. The snow melted slow, giving way to mud, then green. The Crawford ranch breathed again. The fences stood strong, the garden tilled, and the house no longer echoed with emptiness. Samuel had stopped counting the days since Clara arrived. He only noticed when she wasn't near. They worked side by side now, Clara in the garden, Samuel mending fences or breaking horses. The quiet between them was different, comfortable. When she hummed while working, he caught himself listening instead of pretending not to. Sometimes she'd catch him watching and look away, shy but not angry. One afternoon, Samuel rode to town alone. When he came back, he carried a package wrapped in brown paper. He set it on the kitchen table without a word. Clara looked at it, wary. "What is it?" Quote, "Open it," he said. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a bolt of blue calico fabric, soft and new. She stared, eyes filling. "I can't take this." "It's not charity," Samuel said roughly. "You deserve something pretty." Her hands trembled as she touched the fabric. She hadn't owned anything new in years. "Thank you," she whispered. That night she stayed up late, cutting pattern pieces by lamplight. Samuel pretended to read, mostly just watched her. The house glowed warm, full. A few evenings later, they sat on the porch watching the sun go down. The sky burned orange and purple, and the air smelled like wet soil and new life. Clara sewed while Samuel carved a piece of wood. She leaned her shoulder against his, just slightly. Testing. Samuel went still, breath caught. She didn't move away. He turned, slowly, and lifted his hand toward her face. His fingers brushed her jaw, tracing the line where the scar met smooth skin. Clara's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. Their eyes met, hers dark and afraid, but filled with something fragile, something that looked a little like hope. He leaned closer, then he hesitated. Sarah's voice rose in his mind like a ghost. "What if you fail her like you failed me?" Clara felt the hesitation, the cold space between them. She drew back. "It's late," she said quietly. "Good night, Samuel." Her voice cracked on his name. It was the first time she'd used it, and it sounded like goodbye. She disappeared inside, and the door closed softly behind her. Samuel sat on the porch until the stars came out, hating himself for his weakness. Inside, Clara pressed her face into the pillow and wept silently. The moment had been perfect, until fear ruined it. By morning, distance had returned. Their words became careful again, polite. The blue fabric she'd started sewing lay untouched on the table. A few days later, they went to town for supplies. Clara waited by the wagon while Samuel went inside the general store. Around the corner, she heard voices, Mrs. Hartwell and 2 other women. "That poor Mr. Crawford," one whispered, "trapped in a marriage of pity. They say she still sleeps in the maid's room." "It's shameful," another said. "He deserves better." Clara stood frozen, breath shallow. She turned away before they saw her, climbed into the wagon, and waited. When Samuel returned, she was pale. "You all right?" he asked. "Fine," she said tightly. "Let's go home." The ride back was silent. That night, she barely spoke. The next morning, Samuel was out branding cattle when Marcus Dalton rode up to the ranch house. Clara opened the door, flour on her apron, and froze when she saw him. Dalton smiled his mean smile. "Mrs. Crawford," he drawled, tipping his hat. "Mind if I speak plain?" "Speak," she said, "and then leave." He held up an envelope. $500, enough to start over somewhere east. Crawford deserves a real wife. You know it, I know it. Take the money, make it easier on everyone. Clara's hands shook. "Get off this property." Dalton leaned closer. "He didn't defend you in town. You saw that. He's ashamed. That tells you everything." He dropped the envelope on the porch rail and rode away. When Samuel returned that evening, Clara was packing her trunk. "What are you doing?" he asked, stunned. "Do you regret it?" she said quietly. "Marrying me." He stared at her, exhausted from the day, dust in his lungs, mind fogged. "It's complicated." Her expression hardened. "Then I'll make it simple. I'll leave." He hesitated. Maybe that's best." The words were wrong, so wrong, but they slipped out before he could stop them. Clara froze, then nodded once. "I'll be out by morning." She kept her back to him as she packed. He stood in the doorway, wanting to speak, but pride and fear sealed his throat. Finally, he turned and walked out to the barn. At dawn, Clara walked down the dirt road toward town, small trunk on her shoulder. The house behind her looked silent again, empty. Samuel watched from the window as she grew smaller, then disappeared. On the kitchen table, he found the blue fabric. Beneath it, a note written in careful script. "Thank you for trying to be kind. I'm sorry I wasn't enough." He read it once, then crumpled it in his fist. For 3 days, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. He stopped shaving, stopped eating. The air inside felt heavy, dead. On the 4th day, he rode to Sarah's grave. Rain soaked his coat as he knelt in the mud. "I thought if I didn't love again, I couldn't lose again," he said aloud. "But I lost her anyway, and maybe I lost you too." The rain fell harder. "I've been alive in body and dead in heart. I don't want to live that way anymore." That night, old Moses, his ranch hand, found him drunk in the barn. "You're a fool, boy," Moses said. "That woman looked at you like you hung the moon, and you let her walk." Samuel's head dropped. "I was scared." "Sarah would have boxed your ears for that," Moses barked. "You failed once, fine. But letting Clara go, that's failure. You've still got time to fix." Samuel looked up slowly. The truth in Moses's voice burned through the haze. He stood, sobered, ready. By Sunday morning, he rode into town, cleaned up, hat in hand, heart pounding. Church bells rang. Inside, the preacher was mid-sermon when Samuel pushed through the doors. Heads turned. Whispers filled the air. Clara was sitting in the back pew, hands folded tight. When she saw him, she froze. Samuel walked down the aisle, boots echoing on the wood floor. The town watched in silence. He stopped before her. "Clara Bennett Crawford," he said, voice strong and clear. "I'm a coward and a fool." She stared at him, eyes wide, tears brimming. "I was scared to love again. Scared I'd fail you like I failed Sarah. But I don't regret a single day since you stepped off that stagecoach. You made my house a home. You made me remember I'm alive." He turned to face the crowd. "Judge her scars, and judge mine first. I've been walking dead for 3 years. She's the bravest soul I've ever known." The church went silent. Even Dalton's smirk faltered. Samuel turned back to Clara. "I let you go once. I won't do it again. Come home. Not as duty, not as contract, but as the woman I love." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You hurt me, Samuel." "I know," he said, "and I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." He held out his hand. "We'll be scared together if that's what it takes." Clara hesitated, then reached for him, scarred hand first. She let everyone see it. The church was quiet. Then old Moses started clapping. Slowly, others joined. Samuel led Clara out into the sunlight. The whole town watched them go, but neither looked back. Weeks passed. June brought wildflowers and warmth. The garden bloomed, full and alive. Clara read aloud on the porch while Samuel carved wood. They laughed often now, slept in the same bed. Worked the land together. The past hadn't vanished. The scars remained, but they'd stopped hiding from them. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked one evening. Samuel smiled. "Every day I regret waiting so long to love you." Clara leaned in, kissed him softly. "Worth the wait?" "Worth everything," he said. The stars came out over the ranch. The fields whispered in the wind. 2 broken souls had built something whole, not in spite of their pain, but because of it. Spring had come late to Crawford Ranch, but when it arrived, it stayed.